I realized my life would be full of mundane physical suffering, and that there was nothing special about it. Suffering wouldn't make me special, and pretending not to suffer wouldn't make me special. Talking about it, or even writing about it, would not transform my suffering into something useful. Nothing would. Sally Rooney is an incredible writer. She has such a sense of sureness in her writing. There is something so incredible about the way in which she's able to craft a character, to really draw someone in to the world in which her characters exist. They feel so human, they feel so raw, all of the emotions are so palatable. All of her dialogue feels so effortless and so real. And although it's just stories about people existing, there's something still gripping and entertaining and beautiful about the way in which she's able to craft a story. However, there is a glaring issue that I found in pretty much all 4 of her books that I read. And that issue is what has prompted me to make this video. Hearing so many people talk about how incredible her writing is and all that she's doing for my generation. Yes, however, this one glaring and really concerning almost thing that is existing in all of her works is making it hard for me to truly say that everything about her work is incredible. So let's take her first book, Conversations with Friends. In Conversations with Friends, we're following a 21-year-old poet who's also a college student named Frances. And she gets invited to this couple's house to do this interview situation. In this, she ends up having a relationship with the husband of this couple. The issue with that, however, is that this man is, checks notes, 32 years old. I don't want to say that I'm someone that is completely against age gaps, because maybe not fully. However, this age gap is concerning, and it's concerning for a couple of reasons. Frances is written like a 21-year-old. So she's kind of unlearned. She's kind of not that smart. And not saying every 21-year-old is stupid, right? Because that's untrue. But you can tell that she doesn't have a fully developed frontal lobe. And it's quite obvious in the way in which she's written, which aids in the fact that the writing is spectacular to be able to encapsulate how a 21-year-old behaves so accurately. But the issue that brings us is her then being very obviously only 21 years old and in a relationship with a grown ass man. And I want to kind of give, just for this one, these characters a tad bit of leeway here. Although I think it is very questionable for this 32-year-old character to want to be with this 21-year-old, I can kind of understand why that's happening. Our 32-year-old character, his name is Nick, and he has suffered from really bad depression for a decent chunk of his marriage. And he's also a former child star. So he's hurt, traumatized. So I kind of understand why he is gravitating towards this 21-year-old who is completely and utterly obsessed with him, especially with his marriage not doing well on top of all of that. So he's depressed. He's former child star and kind of struggling to really have a real career as an adult. And then he's having this 21-year-old be obsessed with him. So I understand how we get there. I understand how this is a story that exists because you have Frances, who has a bad relationship with her parents, more specifically her father, and how the abuse and the trauma that she has faced and endured in that relationship then reflects on how she's navigating every other relationship, more specifically a romantic relationship, and why she would end up with someone so much older than her. And I understand on Nick's side how you have your failed marriage and all of these other things going wrong in your life, and having someone that is showing you so much attention, especially, you know, being a former child star and like all the attention that would come with that, how you would be drawn to that. The thing is, though, it's not okay. And there isn't anything about it that can truly be flipped in a way where I can say that this relationship is acceptable. And now, spoilers, I think I would have been fine if the book ended in the way in which it seemed like it was going to originally, which was that Frances ended up just kind of having a situationship with her best friend and ex-partner, and Nick essentially just going back to his wife and them making their marriage into something worth saving. But instead, Nick accidentally calls Frances, accidentally, I guess, and they end up having a whole conversation, and then it's implied that they end up getting back together because he goes to see her at the end of the book, and that's how the book ends. And that's where my problem lies, because everything else that happens, them being together, it kind of being like a fling, if you will, and then them discontinuing that relationship for a period of time because Frances ends up wanting to break it off, that works. That, I think, is a good story. How these two people end up in this questionable situation because of their own questionable histories, that story works. The thing that doesn't work, though, is them getting back together, which makes it feel like this questionable, weird power dynamic, age gap relationship is okay. And it's not. And there's just nothing about it that is okay. And on top of all of that, there's also a moment in this where they're having unprotected sex, which we're going to get on that. And Frances doesn't even realize that it's fully unprotected sex. So when she's having what she assumes to be a pregnancy scare, and she goes to the doctor and they're like, hey, are you having unprotected sex? And she says, kind of. She says, kind of, which makes this even worse because, like I was saying before, it's very obvious that she's 21 and uneducated. It's obvious. And it makes it feel even more predatory that Nick is with someone that is like this, that obviously isn't in the mental place to be able to handle this relationship, really any relationship at all. She's just not in a place to be able to do that. And it's so obvious and it's so concerning. And the fact that Rooney allows this to be the end relationship, like allows this to be how the book ends with them together, is so baffling to me, because what is the lesson there? And not saying that every book needs to have a lesson, but it does make me wonder, like, what is the point of this existing in the way in which it does? And I kind of hate that. And unfortunately, it only gets worse. This one actually is the least offensive out of the four. The one I'm going to talk about last will all make sense, but the next two, this is the least offensive out of them, and I find this to be concerning. And I feel as though Sally Rooney is very aware of what she's doing with these characters, because there is a line in Conversations with Friends that is a conversation that Frances is having with her best friend, ex-partner, Bobby. And this is what they say to each other. What I like about your male characters, Bobby says, is that they're all horrible. They're not all horrible. At best, they're very morally ambiguous. Aren't we all? Yes, technically, but not to the degree in which these characters are. And that will segue me into her next book. I am doing this a little out of order. So this is actually her third book that was released. But let's segue into that, because the characters somehow do in fact get worse. Aren't we unfortunate babies to be born when the world ended? After that, there was no chance for the planet and no chance for us. Or maybe it was just the end of one civilization, ours. And at some time in the future, another will take its place. In that case, we are standing in the last lighted room before the darkness, bearing witness to something. Beautiful world, where are you? Before I even get into anything about this book, allow me to be mean for a second. I think this title is horrific, and I wish this wasn't the title. I understand why it's the title. If you read the book, it makes sense. However, I disagree. I don't like this title. I think this title is horrible. I think it is bad. I think it is stupid. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about that. In this book, we are following 4 characters, similarly to Conversation with Friends, but in this scenario, it's all the characters play a bit more of a pivotal role than the 4 characters in Conversation with Friends, where it was mainly centered around Frances and her relationship to the other 3 characters. This one actually considers all 4 of the characters. In this one, you would think I would be okay with it, given that this one is about these 2 women that are best friends. They are 29 years old, and one of them is in poverty. She's obviously not doing well because she's in poverty. She works at a writing firm, I think. Everyone's got a job, and in the same way in real life, I can't remember what the hell any of my personal friends do. I don't remember what any of these characters do either. So she works at some writing company, or publishing house or something, and she doesn't make good money there, and she's really struggling. And she is in love with this guy that she has literally known her since she was born. They have a 5-year age gap, and they're in love with each other. And on the flip side of this, you have her best friend. Her best friend is a famous writer, and she ends up going on this, I think, Tinder date with this man at the very beginning of the book. And they end up building a relationship. Most of this book is taken place through email. So we get the actual story happening as it's happening. And then we also get the emails that the 2 women, Alice and Elaine, are sending back and forth to each other, which I actually really like. I think it's a really interesting way of writing a story, which again just goes back to Sally Rooney's writing. Although I think this is the weakest of her books, I still really enjoy everything that this book has to say, especially about the world we live in and how tragic and horrible things are around so many of us. But to still have a desire to talk about love and to talk about relationships and to talk about sex and to still have all of those conversations in spite of the world being on fire, in spite of all of these other tragic events going on, to still want to speak on what are the beautiful sides of humanity, which obviously is a privileged position to exist in. And I don't even necessarily feel like she shies away from saying that it is in fact a privileged position to be in, to be able to just talk about those things and not be experiencing them, to have a level of distance, even when it comes to like climate change. Like the climate is in fact bad, but for the ones of us that have housing, like we're not feeling it in the same way that someone that's houseless. The way that she, speaks on all of that, I think is beautiful, and I think it's important, especially as a white woman, to be talking about those things and to not feel as if she should shy away from that, but still being able to acknowledge that she loves to talk about love and sex and relationships and friendships, I think is beautiful. And that might be where my praise for this book ends. I think that's where my praise ends, because now we have to talk about the characters. You might think that these relationships wouldn't be an issue, given that I said that, the two women are 29, and the man that Alice ends up in a relationship with, which I forget what his name is. Is his name Felix, or am I making that up? I think his name is Felix. Oh boy. Okay. The man that Alice is in a relationship with, Felix, is also 29. So now we have 3 characters that are all the same age. And we also have Simon, who is 34, I think. If memory serves, I believe he's 34. And now that's fine. Right? You would think we were okay, that we were doing well. We're not. Okay, here is where we are not doing well. And here's where I find, yet again, that there is a raise of concern for the characters that Sally Rooney is crafting. Let's talk about Alice and Felix really quick first. Alice is depressed, I'd say. Most of Sally Rooney's characters are like mentally unwell, which is fine. Yeah, most of our characters are mentally unwell, and Alice is definitely one of them. Like I said, she's in this relationship with Felix, but Felix pretty much from the jump seems like he hates her. I read this book twice. I read this book about 3 years ago, I think. That was like the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh, this man like thoroughly hates this woman, and I'm not quite sure why he's sticking around with her and why she wants to allow him to stick around. However, I do understand now. Now, after reading it a second time, I do understand. Alice is, like I said, mentally unwell, and she has a lot of problematic views of herself, based on being a famous author. She has all of these people that are saying all of these different takes about her, and it's making her feel sometimes confused as to who she actually is in relationship or in relation to what these people think about her. And I think that's what causes her to still end up with someone that seems like they don't like her, because she's so used to having these very confusing and conflicting feelings about herself under the lens of, or through the lens of, these other people that don't know her. So I understand how she gets there. And then when it comes to Felix, he feels like no one cares about him, and he is aware that Alice is in love with him. And I guess similarly to conversations with friends, he's kind of feeding off of having someone be in love with him and care about him and desire him. And that is the thing that makes him want to stick around with Alice, although he feels like she looks down on him and belittles him. There's something about the push and pull that he resonates with and desires. That's the limit of what I get and I see, because what I then have to bring up and I don't want to. What I then have to bring up is there is a moment in which Alice is holding Felix's cell phone. He hands it to her and is like, hey, can you look something? He's trying to fix the shower, and he hands her his phone, and she clicks on the internet and sees that he was watching porn. She thinks that the porn is like questionable and bad or whatnot. She feels like it's not appropriate and literally hates what he's was watching, and it makes her view him differently. And they end up having a conversation, I think either that night or like the next day, about what she saw. And Felix is like, hey, like, I'm sorry that that you saw that and you hated it. And then he decides that it's like confession hour. And here's where it gets dicey and gross and weird, because he proceeds to say, "I've done horrible things compared to that." She stopped typing then and looked at him. "Like what?" she asked. "Loads of things," he said. "Where would I even start? Like, for example, you'll hate this one. About a year ago, I brought some girl home after a night out. And then I found out later that she was still in school. And I'm not just saying that to fuck with you. I'm serious. 16 or 17. I think she was. Did she look older? I want to say she must have, but I didn't think about it. We were both drunk." And then he follows that up with saying, "Worst thing I've ever done. I got a girl pregnant when I was in school. She was in junior and I was in 5th year. Have you ever heard anything worse than that? Her mom had to take her over to England. I think they got a boat over. She was like 14 or whatever. A little child, basically. We weren't even supposed to be having sex. I talked her into it. I mean, I told her it would be fine. Anyway, that's the worst thing." I am left to ask, what am I supposed to take away from that? What is the logic in having a character that hates his, I guess technically girlfriend, and then confesses to statutory rape, and then, spoiler alert, ends up still with her at the end of the book? Am I supposed to feel as if this is supposed to be representative of our need to forgive people? That no matter how heinous what someone has done is, that I should still be okay with it, that I shouldn't draw a line anywhere, that I shouldn't think that these characters should draw a line anywhere? Because right after they have this conversation, they proceed to have sex. After that, when Alice is writing her letter to Elaine, that is not her name. That is not her name. Whoa. It's definitely Eileen, isn't it? It is. Anywho, we see afterwards when Alice is writing her letter to Eileen about Felix and their relationship and everything that she like learned about him. She says that she knows it's not up for her to forgive him, because obviously he didn't do anything to her. I mean, he's done things to her, but he didn't like do that to her. So she doesn't really have the right to forgive him. However, she believes that he's sorry, and she believes that he wouldn't do it again. And there's something about that not only makes my skin crawl, but also kind of makes me a little bit enraged, because that's not a good message. The idea that we should just kind of believe that people won't do harmful things again, it's complicated, because like in certain situations, yes, people can change, and I don't want to play pretend like that's not the case. Like, people can't become better and realize that they've done something problematic. And I also do want to take into account that, at least for the pregnancy one, he was really young. I don't want to like fault the character too much for something that he did at what did he say, like 16. I don't want to like say too much on that. However, it does get a little scary, because who's to say that someone won't? Here's where I can't help but be empathetic, but I also am just like, I don't think that should necessarily be a takeaway message in a book where it is unclear if this is true. I guess that's what I want to say. It just concerns me to have this type of message out in a book, especially considering the audience, because I feel like Sally Rooney also has a younger audience, and I say younger loosely. I kind of mean like early 20s. I feel like she kind of has an audience in like that age range. Like, I don't think there's as many people that are in like their late 20s like me that are reading her books, but like maybe, I don't know. But regardless, there's something about that just I find really, really unsettling, that I'm supposed to have just read him doing a crime. This character's like, but I just think that he's grown and he's changed, and like I should forgive him. And it just kind of stresses me out. And it only gets worse because now we're going to talk about Eileen and Simon. So like I had said before, Eileen and Simon have known each other since they were children. And it was very obvious that Eileen liked Simon. And although I try to convince myself throughout reading the book that, Simon didn't like her when they were children, when there was that 5-year age gap that actually did matter back then, because the 5-year age gap would obviously feel a lot more prominent than it does with them both being adults. It's like, no, there wasn't anything going on with them. Like Simon he was just nice to her, and that's why she was into him, and that makes sense. Given that Eileen was kind of, the outcast and people didn't really like her. And then you have this like really attractive boy that is showing interest in you or like just cares when you speak. I get how she would end up falling for him. And if anything, I guess I kind of assumed that Simon was more like just kind of flattered by this little girl being obsessed with him. But then we do get these handful of lines that allow me to know that that's not the case, and that is not the messaging, and it isn't them being adults and then realizing, oh, we should be together. Nay. It is that they've technically been in love with each other since they were children. Right. And now the first line I want to read is the one that gave me the ick the most. So for a little bit of context, because I think the context is important, they're having phone sex, and that's fine. They're adults, fine. They're having phone sex. However, in this, they are pretending that Eileen is talking about Simon's wife, and in this fictional scenario that he has a wife, she's saying all of the things that his wife would do to/for him. And she says, your wife would never talk to you like that. Why? Does she worship me? Yes. You're like a father to her. The age gap isn't that big. Like I said, it's only 5 years. It's not actually that serious with them both being adults, but it is, that's a choice of words. To throw the mic. That is a serious choice. Why like a father? What is that supposed to mean to me? And I know it's not giving incest, and I can assume, and maybe I'm saying this for my sanity, I can assume it's giving subdom type thing. I can try to convince myself that it's going into BDSM territory. I can try to convince myself. I don't believe that though. I actively don't I can actively feel myself gaslighting myself over this and trying to convince me that that this is something that is like okay. It's not. It's why is that the language that we're going with the context that Simon has, which we don't find out this context until later, so it makes it worse. But the context that we are aware that Simon has essentially been obsessed with this woman since she was born. When he was 5 years old and she was born, he was obsessed with her from then. And even proceeds to say at one point in this, even as a child of 5, I had beautiful taste. Only the finest babies made the grade. And I am left yet again to wonder, are all of these men that she is writing not morally ambiguous, but straight up perverts? No, Ethel Cain. Are they straight up perverts? Because why is this the type of relationship that is being cultivated in these books? Constantly being that a man that is older than said young woman, who is very obviously in a bad place. Why is this the type of woman that these male characters are going for? Because it always just comes off as predatory, and there's no other way of looking at it. It always feels predatory. And it's just like, am I supposed to think that these relationships are okay? And the reason why I have to keep asking, am I supposed to believe these relationships are okay, is because at the end, they end up having a baby. And I think they're like married too. They like end up getting married and like having a baby. And I'm just supposed to like think that that's fine? That this man that was, you know, even as a small child, already being obsessed with this newborn baby, and then when she was 15 and he was 20 years old, was into her then, and that they have a moment where they almost kiss, and then he, I guess, realizes that he shouldn't fucking do that, and then opts out of doing it. But it's very obvious that there's tension there, and that he shouldn't have, even as a 20-year-old, allowed there to be any sort of a tension between him and a child. I must ask, is like this the type of romantic relationship representation that some of y'all are after? The ones of you all that like enjoy these books, like, do you have a means of explaining how you navigate these relationships and why you think that they are okay? Because I'm not following, and I'm disturbed. I am greatly, greatly disturbed. And this one, I think, might have been, I'd say this one's the worst. But I know once we get on to the next book, I'm gonna say something different. oh boy. Okay, so on to her most recent book, the third book that I'm going to be talking about, Intermezzo. Let's I feel like maybe I still don't accept it. The idea that my dad is gone. I don't really get how it could be the case, if you see what I mean. I think I do, she says. Like he just sort of exited from time, and we all have to keep going within time. Intermezzo. Oh, Intermezzo. In Intermezzo, we are following two brothers, Peter and Ivan, who have just lost their father. We are essentially just watching both of them navigate life after this loss. Ivan is a chess player, professional chess player, which is how you see the cover. Ivan's a professional chess player, and Peter is what would be a lawyer in America. Ivan ends up meeting this woman named Margaret, who is, again, significantly older than him. Margaret's 36. Ivan is 22. I'm about 45 minutes into this video and I'm about to crash out. Oh my God. Okay. They end up kind of hitting it off as soon as they meet each other. She's in charge of essentially taking care of Ivan while he's doing this like chess tournament. Like I said, they end up hitting it off pretty soon, or pretty quickly. Margaret goes to take Ivan to the house that he'll be staying at. Because this tournament is like outside of where he lives. When they get to the house, Ivan invites her in, because of course he does. They end up being intimate, which isn't fine. I was gonna say it's fine. It's not fine. It's questionable. I mean, I guess if it's just like a one night stand, this would be like weird. That's a choice that you're making, Margaret. That's a choice, but whatever. Like I guess I'll let it slide. The issue, however, is that that's not the case. They do end up in a full-fledged relationship, and Margaret's age is a really big point of conversation throughout the book, as it should be, but nothing is really done about it. And the reason why nothing is done about it, or why it even feels unserious that her age is a point of conversation, is because then we have to go and look at Peter, Ivan's older brother, who is, I believe, 32. Peter is in a relationship with two women, technically, which, again, that part's fine. That part's fine. And they're both aware of each other. So that's also like, you know, everyone's technically consenting to like be in this relationship with this man. The issue is that Peter has his like first love, the original woman that he was in a relationship with, Her name escapes me, and I'm not going to keep checking my notes to find out what all these freaking characters' names are. I refuse. But anyways, he's in a relationship with one woman that I believe is like 34. So they're the same age, or just about the same age. But she got into an accident, and she just is in chronic pain from the accident. So things just aren't the same. And they were in this great relationship before, and then the accident happened, and she broke it off with him. She's having a, complex relationship with everything that has gone on with her, and she didn't want to feel as if she was stopping Peter from living because she feels as if her life has stopped because of her accident. Peter ends up in a relationship with a 21-year-old, which, like, conversations with friends all over again, I guess, especially considering that this 21-year-old is a college student. They love the college girls. They love them. She's a college student. She is also a sex worker, and she's also poor. And at one point in time in this story, she ends up being houseless. Literally, police drag her out of the house, and she's evicted with her friends that she lives with, and he ends up taking her in. And that is the man that is scolding his brother for dating someone that is 36. Right. Because somehow he's like the person to do that, right? But let's actually go back to Ivan and Margaret. If you thought I wasn't already uncomfortable by their relationship in this disgusting age gap, it gets worse. There is a line or a moment that exists. Margaret, he says, "Can I kiss you?" She doesn't know what to do, whether to laugh again or start crying. "Okay," she says. He comes over to where she's standing against the fridge and kisses her on the mouth. She feels his tongue move between her lips. Drawing away slightly, he murmurs, "Sorry about my braces. I hate them so much." Because him being 21 wasn't enough. Him just being 21 wasn't enough. And obviously adults have braces, right? Like, I'm not dumb. Like, adults have braces. But let us not be dense in acting as if him being in this relationship with this woman that's nearing 40, and him barely being in his 20s, and him having braces doesn't make things worse. Doesn't feel any more. This doesn't make it feel more as if we're infantilizing him. When I read that section of the book, I feel like I'm having war flashbacks. When I read that section of the book, I did in fact put it down, and I just had to yell about it. Because why? Why is that the decision that I have tears in my eyes. Why is that the decision that was made to not only have him be in a bad place because he's literally grieving his father, like just actively lost his father, who he had a good relationship with. And we also find not only has he lost his father, but he has a bad relationship with his mother, and he feels like the people in his family don't care about him or like really view him as a person, because his mother essentially has like another family. So he feels like an outcast. His father's dead. His dog that he had that was essentially like he and his father's dog is living with his mother, and she is like up his ass being like, "Hey, when you gonna get your dog? Hey, when you gonna get your dog? I don't want to keep holding on to your dog. This is getting weird that I keep having to hold on to your dog." He has all of these things going on, and you have this woman who he's supposed to be in the care of, and this is what she decides to do: allow him to kiss her, and then even goes into, you knew what was going to happen, so you went into this house anyway, and you allow him to kiss you. And then you also proceed to have sex with him at your big age. I hate to age shame. At your big age, that is the decision that is made. And it's like, again, the question I keep asking, what am I supposed to take away from this? Because sure, you know, and now we can get on to Margaret, again, in a failed relationship. Her husband, an alcoholic, she left him. They're not like officially divorced, but they're separated, and been separated for a while. So like, what does it matter whether they're like legally divorced or not, in my opinion? But yeah, they're separated, and she's kind of like traumatized from that experience of dealing with, I don't want to say dealing with, of being in a relationship with someone that is dealing with alcoholism, and her having a complex relationship with that, and therefore having a complex relationship with herself, and like where she fits and all that, and the things that she is deserving of and worthy of, and how, again, another situation where she has this boy that is very much into her and wants to please her and ends up falling for her, and her being infatuated with this idea, with this concept, with this situation. And again, here's where it gets so complicated for me as the reader, is because I understand how we're getting to these places, but I'm just confused as to why this keeps being the choice, because they don't need to be this far apart in age. Honestly, this could just be Peter, right? Like, we don't actually have to, like, Ivan doesn't have to be the person. Like, or Ivan could just be older. He could be in his late 20s, and this would be fine. I'd be like, sure. Like, I wouldn't do it. I don't think I would want to be with someone that's like 36 when I'm 28, but like, whatever. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, go ahead, do your thing. And I could then go and just be having a conversation of like, yeah, it's a little problematic, but arguably you could say they're both grieving in different ways. So it's like, sure, like technically they're on even playing field, even though this is complicated. But it is just such a strange choice to make him so young. And I just don't understand what that truly adds to the story or adds to his character, where it feels like it's worth it, or it makes sense, or it's beneficial to the plot or the characters in any way. It just really feels as if we're just being okay with these age gap relationships and trying to pretend as if this is even, as if there isn't a weird power dynamic happening, as if this isn't strange. And I think the thing about this one that gets me even more is how often these age gaps are acknowledged as fucking weird. So it's like, it's not even like with conversations with friends where I'm supposed to just accept that this is okay. That, you know, we're kind of talking about it a little bit, but it's not kind of being like crammed down my throat of like, yeah, just so you know, this is kind of a weird age gap. Yeah, the age gap's kind of weird. Like, it's not doing that with conversation with friends, but this one is. And I'm just like, okay, so you think it's weird too, Sally Rooney. So why? What is the point? Finally, she says out loud, when I was your age, Ivan, I was still very young. I don't know if it would have been a good idea for me to get involved with someone so much older than I was, especially if that person had been married before, and we were seeing each other in secret. I'm only speaking hypothetically, but I think I might look back on it and feel that this person had taken advantage of me. I think you're going to meet a nice girl your own age, she said, some beautiful 19-year-old, and she'll be able to play chess with you. He started laughing at that. He says, I was about to say 19 seems a little young for me, but maybe that wouldn't be tactful. So it's like, we're aware, right? You, dear watcher, me, the dear reader, Sally Rooney, the dear author, we are all aware that this is weird and disturbing, right? The characters also aware that this is weird and disturbing. Using the language, when I was your age, I was very young. First off, that's crazy sentence. First off, that's a crazy sentence. But it's like, okay, we're acknowledging the fact that this is strange and that it does feel like she's taking advantage of him. And yet they end up staying together for the whole book. And at the end of it, Peter ends up accepting their relationship. And he ends up still being in a relationship with the two women he's in a relationship with, Sylvia and Naomi. Those are their names. He ends up still being in a relationship with both of them. And I'm not going to talk about his relationship with Sylvia too much because I don't think that matters really, because their relationship is rather normal. But we will be talking about him and Naomi because, like I said, Naomi is a 21-year-old college student that's done sex work and is also houseless, and he is the one that ends up taking her in to his home. And the thing about this that gets this feels like icky in a different way. Actually, I think this is so bad. This feels significantly worse in my opinion than even like Ivan and Margaret, because Margaret has some level of guilt, I feel, although it's not moving enough for her to like not be fucking a child with braces, but she's moved at least to some degree to be like, maybe I'm a little weird for this. Maybe I'm a little weird. Like, she does feel bad about it at least. Peter, on the other hand, doesn't. And the language that he uses, I find to be so concerning that I know I've called these other men perverts, but I almost want to call him a pedophile. And I know she's an adult, right? But the way he describes her, I find to be so disgusting that I'm leaning to be like, would he be with someone that's a child? Like, if given the opportunity, if she was younger, would he want to be, like, if she was 17, would he still be like, yeah? In the kitchen doorway, Naomi reappears, smaller now and bare feet, adolescent looking. No, she's a nice girl. It's not her fault. I just get off on messing with her head. I don't know why. I'm in love with someone else anyway. Once you meet your soulmate, there's no point in pretending, is there? Feeling of solace you get when she's near you. To live the right life. Naomi can't complain. She's well looked after. It's all good. We have fun together. Too much fun, if anything. Finding myself fantasizing sometime about getting her pregnant. How pretty she would look. And happy. Take her around town buying things for the nursery. Idea of running into people we know somehow erotic. Look at what I did to her, kind of thing. Also, let it be known, and I had mentioned this again at the beginning, talking about conversation with friends. No one's having protected sex. Nobody is. And I also don't know what that's about either. I don't know what type of, I would say it's a kink thing. Maybe we should start kink shaming again. Because why? Why are we also like having unprotected sex with strangers? Or people that like shouldn't be having children? Like, why are we doing that? The thing again about Peter is like, why are you describing her as adolescent looking? Why are you thinking about getting her pregnant as you doing something to her? What does that mean? What does that mean? The thing that I think frustrates me the most about this book, it's written so well. This book is written so well, and I think the way that it handles grief and the way that someone could behave because they're grieving, and the relationship that Ivan and Peter have to each other and how like toxic and problematic it is, I think is captured so well. And it's so upsetting to know that this book still exists in this place where you're watching these two, this boy and this man, having these very problematic relationships. And it's like, for what? Like, what is the plot gain? What do these characters gain from these relationships being what they are? And why couldn't this be slightly pivoted to not have to be, I don't know, perverse? Like, why can't it be something else? Because I'd say these are like, without these gross age gaps, these are like near perfect books. And that's so frustrating. To be someone that completely disagrees with this one aspect that ends up being such a big part of the book that taints the existence of the book. Like, I want to give all of these books at least 4 stars. Like, honestly. But I can't, because how do I justify all of this? How do I justify these questionable age gaps and these gross relationships and the way in which these characters even discuss these relationships? What am I supposed to do? As the reader, I feel desperate. What am I supposed to do? Anyways, I feel like I'm maxing out on my brain power because this video has stressed me out. Let's go on to her second book that she released, but it's going to be the last book that I talk about, and that's Normal People. He knew then that the secret for which he had sacrificed his own happiness and the happiness of another person had been trivial all along and worthless. He and Marianne could have walked down the school corridor hand in hand, and with what consequence? Nothing really. No one cared. Normal People is an interesting one, especially in comparison to these other three. The first word that came to mind was monstrosities. Whoa. The other three, just the questionable antics of those books. I think the most questionable thing that happens in Normal People might just be that the two characters start having sex as kids, and like we get graphic enough depictions of that. I think that might be the most questionable thing that happens in here, and I kind of feel about it just because it's not YA, like it's meant for adults. Maybe that actually makes me feel weird, like more weird about it, to be an adult and have to read about like teenagers having sex. Okay, I didn't think about that until I said it out loud, but here we are. Anyways, Normal People is about these two children. We do watch them grow up to be in their early 20s, but we start off with these two children. One of them is very wealthy, and she has a really bad relationship with her mother, has a really bad relationship with her brother. They're both very abusive, especially her brother is very abusive, and her mother just kind of ignores it and acts like it's just not going on, or it's her fault. And on the flip side of that, we have this boy who his mother works for this girl's family, and he is, not nearly as good of a place as she is. I don't know if they're necessarily like classified as poor per se, but they're definitely not in anywhere near the financial position as this girl is. He also is doesn't have a relationship with his father. I forget what exactly like happens to his father, but he doesn't have a relationship with his father, and he lives with his mother, and his mother obviously is a single mother, and also she had him as a teenager. So these two kids the boy ends up coming over to come and like pick up his mom because she doesn't drive and he does, and the two of them end up conversing, and eventually they end up building a relationship, and they end up sleeping together, and they end up coming back to each other throughout their lives. The reason why this one is so confusing to me is because this one doesn't have any weird like age gap things. There are two scenarios in which there technically is an age gap thing that happens, but we are aware as the reader, and the characters in the book are aware that these characters are being assaulted. So there isn't any like, oh, that we should be like okay with this and this is perfectly fine. It's not at all navigated in that way. There's a situation where our main female character gets assaulted at a party. There's this older boy that ends up like touching her, and it is stated pretty outright that it's not okay, that what happened to her, and that it shouldn't be excused. Regardless of if this guy is considered like a good guy, it doesn't matter. What he did was like fucked up. When it comes to the male main character, he has a teacher that has a crush on him and is very obvious about it, and he kind of strays away from discussing it, and because the boys in his class think that it's like, oh no, this is fun, and like she likes you so much, and like you should do something about it, and this, that, or the third, the way that like some kids are. But he's very like uncomfortable about it and like says he's uncomfortable. And there's a situation where they're both at a party, I believe, and she comes on to him, and he like rejects it wholeheartedly, and it's understood that like, yeah, he was assaulted, and that was like a fucked up thing that happened to him, which feels like such a strong shift from her other books, because you would think, especially with this like teacher, that the thing would be that he would, once he was an adult, he would end up like having a thing with her, just based on the trajectory of like the rest of her, like where we end up with, you know, Beautiful World, Where Are You, and Intermezzo. You would think that's what would end up happening, or even the way Conversations with Friends existed. Like you would think that would be our course of action, but no, it ends in a completely like normal way. And if anything with this book, it's just kind of sad. I don't even necessarily have like a lot to say about it. It's just, it's really depressing. You're just kind of watching these two kids into young adults just end up falling for each other and then breaking apart, and falling for each other and breaking apart. And you watch our main female character just kind of get like abused just over and over and over again, and our main male character having a hard time existing and feeling comfortable with having any sort of positive thing happen in his life, any sort of positive relationships. We also watch him, again, like I said, so many of them have mental health issues. We witness him being actively very, very depressed, concerningly so, being very depressed. The whole thing is just kind of sad, just like watching both of them try to navigate existing both with and without each other, and what that entails, and their relationships with other people. But there isn't, I feel like, as much to chew on with this one as there is like the other books. And I say all that to say I think this is also still kind of one of the better ones, just because it's not doing this weird like age play situation. It exists as this really sad book, but it's not doing anything gross. It's somber the whole time. So I don't even really have much else to say about it. Oh, the one thing I guess that I will say, and this is my ending for this book, is unlike the other ones, this one has a more like ambiguous ending. I didn't particularly love the ending because I just wish that the main female character would like want better for herself, but I do understand why, based on all of the things that has happened to her, that she inevitably wouldn't see that for herself. But I did like the idea that this book ends where you can assume that they will end up getting back together because they keep, you know, coming back to each other. But it does kind of leave you with the possibility that they won't. That hopefully they will move on with their lives and be better, or if anything, they'll come back together as better people at some point and not always just kind of be down bad and distraught. But yeah, that's it for normal people. I think that if I'm gonna like recommend any of them, I'd actually say I'd only recommend her first two, in spite of like how questionable Conversations with Friends is. It was still written so well that I still gave it 4 stars, and I still really enjoyed it, even with, you know, all of my critiques of it. Yeah, that's all of Sally Rooney's books. I think, again, she's an incredible writer, and I think that she's doing such a good job at, you know, talking about heavy topics, about cultivating characters that feel real and well fleshed out. But there is this like glaring issue, and that is the relationships themselves and these age gaps and how they can come off quite abusive and problematic, and a lot of these characters feel not morally ambiguous, as I guess she believes that they are, but they feel like they need to be in jail. Yeah, a lot of them feel like they deserve jail time. But that's it for me. That is my Sally Rooney video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video if you like the video. Leave a comment about what your thoughts are on Sally Rooney's work. If you personally have any explanation for any of this, I'd love to hear it if you do. Or if you could even recommend other like authors or books that kind of are written, I guess, similarly, but don't have these like weird and gross like age gap situations, that would be great. I'd love to read some of them because I do enjoy this type of literature. Subscribe, because this will be my first video on this channel, which is very exciting. So please subscribe if you would like to see more of me. You can follow me on Goodreads, on Storygraph, on Apple Music, and I think that's it. Okay, see ya. Bye.